Good afternoon, everyone. The Institute of Company Secretaries of India, with its vision to be a global leader in promoting good corporate governance, has been constantly endeavoring to pursue initiatives ensuring strengthening of governance framework in all business enterprises, irrespective of their form, structure, and size. The micro, small, and medium enterprises, with their ages of presence in the Indian scenario and contribution to the economic growth as well as social development, has been constantly seen as foundational pillars in the country. It is for this reason that the project of Atmanirbhar Bharat found the MSMEs garnering maximum limelight. Considering the growing importance of MSME and its compliances, the Institute of Company Secretaries of India has rolled out this initiative of conducting a series of 5 webinars on a weekly basis, covering all the substantial aspects related to MSMEs. The aim is to undoubtedly upgrade the skills of our professionals in the area of legal framework of MSMEs. Further, I would also like to remind all our members that the last date to apply for the 23rd edition of ICSI National Awards for Excellence in Corporate Governance is also approaching. The last date is 24th of August 2023. This time we have added a new category for the SME listing entities as well. Make sure that all the companies connected with you apply for these awards. So with this, I welcome all of you at this second webinar of the ICSI MSME webinar series on the topic MSMEs Monetary and Recovery Framework. Our guest speaker for the day today is Advocate Jitendra Gupta ji. Welcome you, sir. He is advocate with Supreme Court of India and a mediator on the panel of Delhi High Court Mediation and Conciliation Center and National Consumer Disputes Resolution Commission. An independent law professional, he specializes in constitutional, corporate, and property matters and has also been representing the MSMEs before Supreme Court and High Courts for the issues related to labor and employment. Associated with various trade and industry associations in NCR for the last 30 years, he is presently chairing the MSME Committee, Faridabad chapter of Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So, before Mr. Gupta starts, I will request all the participants to raise as many queries as possible to clarify all your doubts. So, we welcome you, sir. Please
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
Thank you so much for having me here along with your wonderful batch of ICSI attendees. I have been doing this in the past also. So what we'll do is that the format is very simple. I will try to just give you an overview of the legal framework first. But since the legal framework is better understood when we have the queries so that we can get our queries resolved. So I'm open to as many queries as you have already said in your opening lines. So I'll just give you a quick overview. You see, MSME, there was a special act for MSME that was enacted in 2006, which we call as MSME D, Micro Small Medium Entrepreneurs Development Act 2006. Now, as such, one of the best feature of this act was to ensure the recovery of delayed payments for MSME. So that was the feature. It has been 17 years, but in spite of that, the act has not been, there is the awareness for the act has not been abandoned. We are still at the nascent stage. The courts are at the nascent stage to understand the act, but those people who understand the act and are going for it, they realize the potential of it. People continue to file civil suits, commercial suits, go into arbitrations. While if you are an MSME, then this is the best act for recovery of payment. However, I'll clarify that the act that I am going to discuss, the provisions that I am going to discuss, even though the name of the act is MSME, but this protection is only available to micro and small and not to medium. It is available to suppliers who fall under micro and small and not the medium units registered under the act. So with your permission, can I share my presentation, please?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead, sir.
Uh, am I visible, ma'am? The
Yes,
presentation?
sir. It
Yes.
is visible.
Okay. So that's me. My name is Jitendra Gupta. I'm an advocate on record with Supreme Court, and I have been dealing with the various types of payment recovery cases for the MSMEs under the MSME law, the insolvency law before the NCLT, and even the Commercial Court Acts. Now, the problem is that these days the margins, while the when the companies, the buyers are negotiating and the competition is there both from the Indian market and overseas market, the margins are wafer thin. And in that case, if somebody's payment is defaulted or not recovered, then it breaks the backbone of the smallest entrepreneur, which is the micro and small. And uh, any payment that is lost effectively translates into 8 to 10 times of turnover that will be required to compensate or bear that loss. So that is why every penny is important. Now this is the act I was telling about, Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises Development Act 2006. In short, we also call it as the MSMED Act 2006. Now, this act was initially the definition of a micro, small, and medium was different. It was linked to only the plant and machinery investment. For manufacturing and services, it was separately. But now, uh, so this is the before amendment definition, that if you are a manufacturing, then you will be called, if you are a micro, if your plant and machinery investment was 25 lakhs, for small it was 5 crores, or for medium it was 10 crores. And likewise, if you were a service industry, a service provider, then the limit was lesser in plant and machinery, 10 lakh, 2 crore and 5 crore. But during COVID, these definitions were changed and the act was amended, and now uh, the micro, small and medium, the difference between the manufacturing and service has been taken over, but a new clause of turnover has been added. So now your turnover is also taken into consideration. So whether you are a small manufacturing or a service, if your plant and machinery investment is less than 1 crore and your turnover is less than 1 crore, then you are a micro. Now this is, please note that this is not or, this is and. Both the conditions should be met. Similarly, for small, the plant and machinery investment should be less than 10 crores and turnover should be less than 50 crores. And third, which is 50 and 250 crores respectively. So suppose if somebody's plant and machinery investment is less than 10 crores, but their turnover is increased by 250 crores, then they will not remain in small. Then they will automatically become under the medium category. So that is why it has to be read in conjunction with the turnover. And this is with effect from 1st July 2020. This is prospective and not retrospective. Now, how to register? There, there are websites by government. If you Google and you find the the registration website of this ministry, you will find you don't require any agent. There is no cost to register. It's a self-declaration document. Now it is, the registration number is called as Udyam registration. In its previous avatar, it used to be called as Udyog Aadhaar number, which has now been discontinued. So you now have to register as an Udyam registration. As I said, it is online, it is free, and once you complete the payment process, the registration process, it automatically generates your Udyam number. The person who will be doing the registration process, they will need an udyog, they will need a personal Aadhaar number. The promoter will need a personal Aadhaar number. And irrespective of, suppose if you are both into manufacturing or services, or you have multiple units, then you don't have to make multiple registration. One single registration is good enough for all your business entity. What are the benefits of MSME registration? The benefit of MSME registration is one, there is a protection against delay in payment, especially for micro and small, not for medium. But for other categories, there are there are certain financial institutions which comes up with schemes at time where the credit facility is collateral free if you are an MSME. You have a technology upgradation support by various financial institutions and governments. Then in some cases, if there is certain certification required, so there is a reimbursement of certification fee for MSMEs for acquiring certain standards. Then if you are going for credit rating, then sometimes the credit rating also you get some concession, some benefit, some support if you are an MSME. Similarly, if you require marketing support or barcode support, there all the MSME supports are there. And then the trade receivable discounting system. Since I will be confining my presentation to the legal framework, so I would not be delving into the schemes of the government with respect to various benefits, but these are certain other benefits which apply. However, I will be dealing primarily with the protection against delay in payment. Now, under the MSME Act, irrespective of whatever are your terms and conditions in your purchase order, in your contract, or anything, it says that if somebody has made a delivery of goods or rendered services, then the date of acceptance generally is the actual date of delivery of goods. Like suppose if you have sent goods to somebody, then the goods are delivered on the next day, then it is the date of actual delivery. But then if uh, the buyer has not made any objection with respect to the goods or services, acceptance of goods, within 15 days from the date, then they are treated as deemed acceptance. Which means if there is an MSME supplier and there is a buyer, which may be an MSME or non-MSME, anybody who buys from an MSME should ideally raise any objection within 15 days of delivery. Any subsequent objection may not be entertained, and that is why we call this 15 days as the appointed day, the day following immediately after expiry of 15 days from the day of acceptance or days of deemed acceptance. Buyer, anybody who buys goods. Enterprise, these sections as you see, this is section from the Act, section 2D, section 2E. Then the definition of enterprise, then the definition of supplier. Now, as I told you, in section 2N, since the definition of the supplier is under the Act is only micro or small, which means if somebody is registered under MSME but they are medium and not micro or small, then these benefits do not come to their rescue because they will not fall under the definition of supplier under section 2.
So, sir, why this medium term is used in the act, name of the act itself, and we always call it together with the small and
Because as I said, the other host of features, the other facilities will apply to all MSMEs, but these payment protection clauses have only been given to micro or small units, not to
okay,
the,
okay. Other benefits are available to the
yeah,
medium industries as well.
like I said, these other benefits.
Yeah,
So
the credit rating and these
there
technology.
also, if they are exempting, they will tell that this is to this category. So the Act is MSME, but this particular payment recovery benefit under MSME Act only applies to small and micro, not to
Yeah.
medium. Now, before I go to the MSME Act feature, let me tell you what are the other some of the other acts where an MSME may go for their delayed payments. If an instrument has been issued by the opposite party, like a check has been issued but the check has bounced or the check has been stopped, then there is a criminal proceeding under the Negotiable Act, section 138, 141 of the Negotiable Instrument Act, which is one of the remedy. Under the MSME Act, if you are a micro and small enterprise, it has two steps. In the first step, the conciliation, which means the settlement proceedings, the mediation will be done, and if the mediation fails, it will be referred to an arbitration institute or an arbitrator, and then the normal arbitration under the Arbitration Act 1996 will continue. The insolvency and bankruptcy code is which is done against a private limited or a limited company, but the minimum threshold these days is 1 crore, and the proceeding takes place before NCLT.
But these, sir, sorry to interrupt you in between. This Negotiable Instrument Act and this IBC, this is available for all the companies, not
All. I wanted to tell that before I
the
talk
other
about the
laws.
MSME Act,
Mhm.
an MSME should know what other remedies they have so that they can elect the right remedy.
Okay, okay.
Because it may happen when we deal in the QA, people will start comparing various other remedies, why this, why not that. So that is why I thought I'll just discuss the other remedies available.
All right.
Then the arbitration. Sometimes there is a contractual breach and an arbitration clause is mentioned. So if the in certain cases the MSME Act may not be applicable, and then in that case you will have to straight away invoke the Arbitration Act. Then the good old civil suit has now been replaced by Commercial Court Act 2015, and if the recovery is for more than 3 lakh rupees, then this is a new fast track civil remedy called as Commercial Court Act 2015. In Civil Commercial Court Act 2015 also, you have to go for a pre-litigation mediation or a pre-institution mediation before you file a suit. And lastly, you have other remedies under the Criminal Procedure Code. If somebody has committed forgery or fraud against or cheating, then that may also apply. Now we come back to our MSME Act with which we started. MSME Act says that we discuss the date of acceptance and the date of deemed acceptance. Now under this act, under section 15, a buyer has to make payment to the supplier within 15 days of 45 days of the acceptance or deemed acceptance date, which means even if the purchase order says 90 days, 120 days, then also the buyer has to pay within 45 days of the date of acceptance of goods. Now what if the buyer fails to pay? Now as such, people put their invoices 9%, 10%, 12%, 18%. If you are an MSME and you invoke MSME, then under section 16 and 17, if a buyer fails, then the interest is 3 times RBI rate compounded monthly. Like presently the RBI rate should be around 4.5%. So if somebody delays payment beyond 45 days, then the rate of interest is 13.5 compounded monthly. And this overrides any other agreement, any other law. If it is, if you are invoking MSME, then this is your entitlement. How to invoke? So any party, any supplier who there is a dispute under section 17, they have to file it before the MSME council. Now MSME council is created in every state. As such, in civil remedy, in commercial court acts, or in arbitration, sometimes you have to file cases in the jurisdiction of your buyer. But in MSME Act, it is very clear that you will invoke jurisdiction where the MSME is located. Which means if MSME is in Haryana, they will approach MSME Haryana. If MSME, the supplier, if supplier is in Delhi, they will file the case before Delhi. Irrespective, the buyer may be anywhere in the country. So you will have to, there is a portal called MSME Samadhan. The case has to be first filed online, and then the case will be marked to a particular Samadhan center, conciliation center, where they'll first call you for conciliation proceedings, and thereafter, if the conciliation fails, then it goes to arbitration. The recommended timeline for decision of reference by an MSME council is 90 days, but let me clarify, this is not directory or mandatory, this is only advisory. The courts have ruled so. So as I said, where the conciliation stand terminated, then the matter goes to arbitration. The arbitrator would also be in your jurisdiction. Now, as such in all other law, if the award is passed and then any appeal is filed, then it is up to the court whether to impose any financial deposit or not. But under MSME Act, if any appeal against the award is to be filed, then as per law, 75% of the decree or award has to be first deposited in the court. Only then the court can decide the appeal. Then there is a mandatory compliance under the MSME Act, that every buyer who requires audit of accounts under any law, they have to declare in their annual statement of accounts the principal and also the interest accrued and payable under MSME Act. And let me tell you that the interest shown cannot be booked as an expense. Then under the companies compliance under specified companies order 2019 also, the companies under Companies Act have to file a form 1, MSME form 1, where they have to declare whether any MSME has been delayed payment beyond 45 days and the reason. Filing of this form is mandatory, otherwise there are penalty provisions. Now, two more things. This is the latest Supreme Court judgment of 2021, that the MSME registration, benefit under MSME registration cannot be retrospective, which means it cannot be that today you go there online and register yourself under MSME and you claim MSME interest for your pending invoices. It can only be filed, claims can only be filed for a period after MSME registration. And second is the Limitation Act that applies in other proceedings also, civil proceeding, would apply under the MSME Act also, which means claims cannot be filed beyond 3 years when they become time barred. Normally the 3 years we advise that should be taken from the date of invoice, but if it's a running account, the 3 years can also be taken from the date of last payment received. Of course, the limitation period gets extended from the last confirmation by the buyer. Then this is another judgment of 2022 by Supreme Court, Gujarat State versus Mahakali. This says that even if there is an independent agreement between a supplier and buyer, then also the MSME Act will prevail. Which means suppose your buyer has made an arbitration clause and they say that arbitration will take place in Mumbai, but you are located in Delhi, then also the arbitration will take place under the MSME Act and not before Mumbai.
So this act will override the other individual agreements between them.
Yes, it has that non-obstante clause. And then again, they have reiterated that supplier can take benefits provision of the act only for transactions subsequent, not the previous one. So this is the general framework of the law that I normally like to explain, but because somebody who has not been acquainted to this, they normally have a lot of queries. So I'll take a break here and handle any queries if we have, and then if required we'll come back to the provisions and other things related to it. Okay.
Hanji sir, we have received certain queries, so I'll be taking it one by one.
Yes, ma'am.
So first one is explain the possibility of bank moratoriums on loan of MSME.
I would not be, I'm not a banking expert. I'm sorry that only I would be able to confine my queries to the legal framework, not to the policy matters, as I said in the beginning of my presentation.
Okay. Next one is, can traders file for recovery under MSME Samadhan?
No, the traders are not registered under MSME Act.
Okay.
MSME Act, even if they do, then subsequently at a subsequent stage, their case may be thrown out because the Act is only for those who can be treated as the manufacturers or suppliers, but they cannot be used by the traders.
Traders. So next
But
question.
if a trader, like for example, somebody is into air conditioning business. One is they are simply trader of a company like Blue Star, or somebody where they are just buying and selling. Now that will treated as trader. But suppose somebody is doing a turnkey project where they are also doing installation, repair, AMC, and then they can act as a service provider. Then they can come under air conditioning and refrigeration services. They can register as such, where the product becomes a part of the whole bouquet of services being provided, but it is not merely a trading of the
Products. So
product.
ultimately, yeah, they have to become the suppliers themselves under the definition of MSME
some
Act.
some level of value addition would be
Hmm.
required, so that you can qualify to call yourself as a service provider. Merely trading will not bring you under the ambit of the MSME.
Correct. Next one relates to company secretary profession, sir. What is the role of CS in facilitating the funding of MSME?
Uh, Again, I would excuse myself because it does not go. I would confine repeatedly on the presentation that I have done, and in case if there is something related to that.
What are the consequences if payment is delayed to MSMEs? That you have, I think, already briefed the penalty aspect and
Yes, the penalty aspect is there. Though, let me tell you, I am open to queries on, because these are company secretaries, and maybe some of them are chartered accountants also. I'm open to any queries related to recovery of payment under the other laws as well. Not necessary MSME, like we have discussed insolvency, we have discussed commercial courts, we have discussed negotiable instruments. So as far as the legal framework of the MSME recovery, because frankly the legal framework under the entire MSME Act is confined to this. Everything else is related to a government scheme, and since I do not practice government schemes, I practice the law in the court. I can only advise and assist to that extent.
consequences we have already deliberated. So next question is, can a MSME registered entity file application for recovery even if the agreement specifically mentioned that any dispute would be referred to arbitration only? I think
Yes,
this you have, yeah.
yes, you can, and you should, because the arbitration will happen, but the scope of arbitration, even in MSME, the arbitration will happen. But when you do it through MSME, the delayed payment timeline is fixed, the delayed payment interest is fixed, and the jurisdiction will be your jurisdiction and not the jurisdiction of the buyer. So even if I have shared the judgment of the Supreme Court of 2022. So in case if the arbitration clause is there, even then you can go for this.
Yeah. If supplier is registered under particular category supply of goods with MSME, but raise the bill in category services other than the registered category, can such purported MSME vendor claim protection of such amount under MSME Act?
See, as I said in the beginning, when you register, you should declare all your businesses, whether manufacturing, and just like there are codes, you have to pick codes which are applicable to you. So ideally, you should get your MSME registration Udyog Aadhaar number updated. You should add those codes in that, so that there should not be a challenge. Otherwise, today at the stage of filing, it may not be a problem, but tomorrow in a court of law, or they may say that your registration is not there for specifically this activity. So a court may take an adverse, or a tribunal arbitrator may take an adverse view and may even throw out your claim.
So, previously we have raised the question that role of CS in facilitating the funding. So we can, if we can modify this question, and we will ask you what is the role of CS in the recovery. That if you can explain.
Yes, I can explain that. See, eventually, every company would like to uh, have their bad debts to the minimum. But at the same time, sometimes you would see that if a company has raised the bill and that payment is not recovered, then the company has booked it as revenue, and on the balance sheet of a particular year, the company has also paid income tax on that. Because if company is not making loss, then any amount of revenue that the company is generating and any amount of profit that the company would have created over that element uh, would be entitled for the tax slab or whatever the individual or the company may be. So what will happen is that if we reach a stage where you feel that the amount is non-recoverable and you have initiated the right proceeding and the amount is not recoverable, then one advisable thing is to book those amounts as bad debts, reverse them, and offset your profits with the loss thereof. So at least the income tax component of it comes back to you as an expense. And second, if you are aware about the law, then you can ask. Second thing is that I told you about the limitation period. So if you realize that there are certain outstanding payments which are going beyond 3 years period, or which are on the borderline of 2.5 years period, then you should advise your clients or your employers that we need to invoke the legal remedy. Otherwise those amounts will become time barred and it will be like a gift given to the buyer. So they need to invoke the legal remedy. Sending multiple notices, multiple emails, multiple reminders does not prolong or extend your limitation period. The limitation period stops only when you approach an appropriate legal forum. So that is the second. Third, if you are a buyer and not a supplier, if you are a buyer, then you have to ensure that you should know who all are MSME if you are buying from them. And if your suppliers are micro or small, then you should have an internal mechanism to ensure that they are paid for in 45 days. Otherwise their interest liability may arise. And similarly, for those who are company secretaries, the compliance under the Companies Act, where you have to declare the MSME Form 1 as to why the payment was delayed and the payment was not paid, that list has to be declared. Now the risk of delaying that, doing that, is also the moment you declare a Form 1, the it becomes an admitted liability. And once it becomes an admitted liability, the limitation period extends for another 3 years. So you have to see that either if you feel that the amount is not due and payable, then the best course would be to release a proper debit note, send the debit note to the supplier, reverse it under the GST regime also, because even under GST Act, under section 18 of GST Act, if you don't pay within six months, you have to reverse the input. So you have to see that the GST Act is also not violated. Under MSME the timeline is 45 days, and the GST the timeline is 6 months. And tomorrow it should not be a belated objection, because for MSME the objection days is 15. So if you have an objection, then you raise an objection, you send a debit note, you reverse it under the GST also. In that case, the amount will not reflect as due and payable. I hope I am clear.
Yes, sir. So broadly, one has to take care of all the applicable laws and take care cautiously within the time limit and everything given under the act, various acts.
Correct.
Okay, sir. Next one is TRED, that is Trade Receivable and Discount System, mandatory for MSMEs?
I would not be able to comment. You know,
Uh,
I have a good habit or a bad habit, that something I don't know. I don't do guesswork or speculation, because if I give a wrong opinion, it will send a wrong signal.
Correct, correct. That is
Whatever
what is expected.
whatever is my area of expertise, I would do that with authority. But whatever is not there, I would humbly plead innocence and ignorance, not to confuse anybody.
That is the best practice, sir. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next one is the registration of MSME a one-time process or on a renewable basis?
No, it's a one-time process.
It's a one-time.
It's a
Okay,
one-time
once you have
online
become
process.
MSME,
You
okay.
remain MSME, but you have to, suppose you registered as micro, but now since it is a turnover based thing and your
Correct.
category changes, then you have to update, because
Okay.
tomorrow you may be availing the benefit of micro and small. It has happened to some of my clients, and their business grew and they entered into this medium range. Then they could not claim the benefit. Now, if you have not communicated to the other parties, their compliance will also get affected. So you cannot use an Udyog Aadhaar number even after your registration process is changed. So ideally, you should keep it updated periodically if there has been a change.
So, if you are a micro, you have registered yourself as a micro, and you have now become a medium. So, there is any form which is required to be
No,
registered at the Udyam?
same at the Udyam website. You have to update or re-register. You have to update. So then only. So unless and until your status changes, there is no annual renewal required.
Okay. Next one is what is the tax regime for MSMEs?
I don't think so there is any change in the tax regime, but there are certain provisions always there in certain laws, like even under the insolvency and bankruptcy code, there is particular scheme for MSME. Similarly, there may be some benefits or concessions for MSMEs, but I don't think so ki as far as the income tax regime or any other tax regime is
It is
concerned,
not different for MSMEs.
there is no difference.
Any relief is given to MSMEs under GST Act?
No, I don't think so.
Differentiation?
It's a turnover link. Like the moment you become covered under the MSME, 20 lakhs and above, then it will apply. So I don't think so there is any benefit there also.
Okay. Next one is whether NBFC company can be registered under MSME Act and take Udyam certificate.
See, Udyam certificate is not related to any scheme specifically. It is like your Aadhaar card. You have your Aadhaar card, you put your name, address, phone number. Likewise, if you, first thing is that you are required, if you are registering under the MSME Act, you have to define where you are. And then whenever you are applying for something and the checklist says that you have to give Udyam number in case if you are an MSME, like in certain government tenders, they check whether you are an MSME or not. Sometimes the tender fees is waived or it is free or it is reduced or it is lesser than the normal industry. So for all those benefits, wherever there is a checklist, you have to submit. Otherwise, I don't think so there is any requirement.
Okay. So that means it is not related to the object which a company is doing. It is based on the turnover, and
Plant
if
and
that
machinery
limit
investment.
is, yeah.
Yeah. Basically, people register under MSME Act to avail any benefit which may be applicable by any government scheme or any other law which may
Hmm.
apply. So wherever that scheme is there and it says there gives some kind of a differential benefit to MSME, that MSME benefit may be shown.
Okay. Next is even if goods are accepted, but till invoice is not received, the payment cannot be made. Hence, how the period of 40 days will be calculated where goods are accepted but invoice is not received.
Though I'm not a tax expert, but these days can the goods go without invoice? I think some level of documentation will be required. A GST invoice would be required, an e-way bill will be required when the goods are going. In case of services, it may be different, but in case of goods, I think somebody is receiving goods which are GST paid and they would like to send an invoice when they are sending the goods. You cannot just send, there has to be a challan or there has to be a documentation. Even a transporter will require some paperwork. So some level of things are going. And even if you do not have, it says delivery of goods. So what you can always do is, if you are not sending an invoice, then send an email that we have sent these goods and this challan was received, in case if you have not sent the bill. So some level of acknowledgement is required that the goods were delivered.
Okay.
But if you do not issue an invoice, if you do not issue an invoice, then sometimes under the law, your amount does not become due and payable. While in MSME, it links the delayed payment from the date of delivery of goods, acceptance or deemed acceptance. But under certain laws, if you have not released the invoice, then it has not become due and payable. And when something is not become due and payable, it is not at default, especially under IBC. In under IBC, you have to establish that the amount was due, payable, and there was a default. So it is very important. Sometimes in service industry people do, or even in the goods industry people do, that they issue the invoice. They don't issue the invoice because the GST will be due and payable on accrual, and the payment may or may not receive. But that's the wrong practice.
Okay. Next one is why there is no option of enforcement available in MSME courts. This leads to delay and many a times lengthy processes and purpose is defeated for MSMEs.
No, there is a process, as I said, the under the MSME Act. Once you file an claim, the arbitrator will pass an award, and once the award is there, if the person is not paying it, you can file execution proceedings under the before the competent court. Now, suppose if you don't go under MSME, what are the options? That's why I discussed other options. If you file a civil suit will be decreed, and you will have to file execution proceedings even under civil suit. You will have to file execution proceedings even under arbitration if the award is there. But let me tell you, if your recovery is against a company registered under Companies Act, private limited or limited, and the amount receivable is more than a crore of rupees, and there is no dispute raised by the party so far, then the best and the fastest remedy is the insolvency and bankruptcy code. Then it is advisable that you file a section 9 petition under the insolvency and bankruptcy code before NCLT, because a running concern would never like to be declared insolvent. They would either settle, and if they do not settle and if they are actually going to become bankrupt, then also you face the music sooner than later. Because suppose you spend money on a civil proceeding or an arbitration proceeding or an MSME proceeding, you spend money, spend 1.5, 2 years, and then when you are not able to execute the award and you realize that the money is not being paid and the company has become insolvent, then all other proceedings have gone for a toss. So it is better. You see, these MSME Act is also very effective, and as such, the government advisory is that the government purchases should honor this, because if the union government and the state government will not honor a central government act, then the whole purpose is defeated. But you have to push this. So particularly, if somebody is working for public sector undertakings, defense, government agencies, there the push is required. And sometimes if you even send representations to the MSME ministry that so and so government department is not doing, it helps.
I think they wanted to say that there should be a separate code for MSMEs. It is not there. So that the process becomes faster.
Ma'am, MSME court is separate as first, because the council first forum is the MSME council. The matters
Okay.
goes before MSME council, before every state, but the council does not have adjudication power. The council will only do the conciliation. They will try to make both the parties sit and explain that you will have to pay ultimately this much interest is there, why don't you settle? And in settlement, sometimes the suppliers, they waive their interest also. And a large number of cases are settled also. It's not that all cases go for arbitration. But of course, if the settlement does not happen, then the normal forum of litigation will be there.
Okay. So we'll move on to next question. One of my client has made an advance payment to a vendor and vendor did not honor and sent the supplies. Can he take an action under Negotiable Instrument Act or MSMED Act?
Negotiable Instrument Act only applies when a check has returned, when a check has bounced or a check has been stopped. So that is the limited, and that also has to be done within 3 months. The Negotiable Instrument Act has a specified timeline. which means on the date when the check has been bounced, within 1 month, the demand notice has to go. If after the notice within 15 days payment is not made, then within 1 month thereof case has to be filed. If these timelines are not adhered, then Negotiable Instrument Act will not apply. Now coming to MSME Act. MSME Act will typically operate only when the goods and services have been rendered. It will not go for other contractual breach. For other contractual breach, you will have to go to a civil court or an arbitration, but MSME Act will only apply if the goods and services have been actually rendered.
Okay, sir. Next one is entity was medium when it supplied the materials. After reclassification of MSME, it has become micro.
Just a minute. I just need 1 minute break. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
There is an important call. 1 minute.
No problems.
Yes, please. Sorry for the break. Yeah.
No problems. So I was saying that entity was medium when it supplied the materials. After reclassification of MSME, it has become micro. And the payment is still pending for materials which was supplied in the past. Now can entity get the rescue of the delayed payment by making the application?
You can, because on the date of filing you are. But let me be honest, if there is a lawyer like me on the other side, they will claim that on that particular day you were not entitled to do, and those payments were made when you were medium. But what will happen, what could happen is that since Supreme Court has ruled that whatever benefits are there would apply retrospectively and not prospectively. So this is the only challenge area. But if it is an ongoing supply, if it is an ongoing supply, and some supplies have been made while transactions when you were medium, and some supplies when you have become micro or small, then it is worth trying, because then the ambit can be expanded, because there will be some transactions under the small category also. At least for conciliation proceedings and other things, it could be a negotiating tool. See, normally interest is never the bone of contention. Prudent businesses would normally settle even if somebody is ready to pay upfront the principal amount or maybe the bank interest. So the deterrent is there in the form of a heavy interest, but that is why under conciliation proceedings sometimes the matters get settled for lesser interest also.
Okay, sir. Next question is whether Limitation Act applies to proceedings under MSME Act. You
Yes,
have earlier, I think, yes, you have
yes, they will apply.
explained. Then
But
can the
as I
supply?
but as I told, let me tell you, if your buyer is filing MSME one form before the
Mhm.
Companies Act, before the
Mhm.
ROC,
Yeah.
then and in that case your name figures there, you can use it as acceptance of admission of liability, and the Limitation Act extends from the last acceptance or acknowledgement given by the other side. So it could come to your rescue.
Okay. So they can take benefit of this MSME one form one filing.
Correct. Sometimes also because if somebody has shown it as a liability in their balance sheet,
Mm-hmm.
if somebody has not written it off in their balance sheet, then if somebody is filing a balance sheet where you are reflecting under the debtor, under the creditors, then also it can be benefit to you, na? Because you can say that on in the March balance sheet, if your name is reflecting as due and payable by the person who has filed the balance sheet, then you may seek an extension on that. We have that admission of liabilities there. Even a TDS form, a 26 AS TDS certificate can be treated as admission of liability to an extent. A GST registration form, a debit note, last payment, these are some of the things by which, or even a payment confirmation. We normally advise people that after every financial year, they should send their ledgers by email and by post to their customers and say that this is required for our finalizing the balance sheet. And if some of them mechanically confirm the ledger to you, then from that confirmation, the limitation period restarts.
Mhm. Next one is, can the supplier agree for payment period of more than 45 days in a contract?
They can, but the law says that even if it was agreed upon, uh, I mean, law waiver will apply. You may not claim, but suppose if things go south, then a supplier can still go and say that my entitlement is under the act, and I had no option but to sign below the dotted lines at the time of contract. So the law will prevail. See, uh, statute is over and above the contract. When you do a
Correct.
statutory arbitration, then it is
Mhm.
over and above the contractual arbitration. But when you do a contractual arbitration, then it will be within the four walls of the contract. That is the difference between the contractual and statutory arbitration. Since MSME is statutory arbitration, that is why it has to be understood in that perspective. As I keep on saying, the awareness of this law is very low. And sometimes people feel that they should know this law only when they are MSME suppliers, because otherwise it does not apply. But I feel that the chartered accountants and the company secretaries who are on the purchaser side, they should know the law much more better than those on the supplier side.
Okay. They can then,
They can advise their client for the
uh,
possible, because if a client out of ignorance is not knowing, and tomorrow they have to cough up a compound interest of 13.5 monthly rate, and they have not paid their supplier for 3 years, sometimes the delayed interest amount is equal to or even more than the principal amount. And then they will ask the chartered accountant and company secretary that why did you not know about the law?
yeah,
Then it
correct.
reflects poorly. So that is the whole purpose of taking this session and doing this awareness.
Mhm. They can save their company from the remedies which are available to the MSME suppliers.
And also they can circumvent the limitation period, or understand, if you are on the supplier side, you should know how to keep on increasing the limitation period. So these are
Yes.
some of the practical tips I wanted to discuss.
Okay, okay.
And
Thank
similarly, I would advise all the suppliers to to put their Udyog Aadhaar number on their invoices. Just like they put their GST number, they should put their Udyam number, and they should put at the bottom, so that there is no ambiguity, that all delayed payment shall attract interest as per MSMED Act 2006. Which
But
means,
is it not mandatory
no,
under
it's
the
not
law?
mandatory. It's not mandatory. Some people are going with their own old invoices that we will pay 18% interest, all disputes subject to this jurisdiction, that jurisdiction. But when you will file under MSME, all this will become meaningless. So it is better that you simply write one line that all delayed payment interest should be as per MSME Act 2006. At least your buyer knows that you are conscious of the law, and they are less likely to default at your end.
So that no party should become the in the problematic situation within the four walls of law, they should act.
Correct.
Next one is, what is the normal timeline in India to close a case which is registered through Samadhan portal?
See, it is varying from state to state. Normally, uh, Delhi was having a very delayed mechanism, but now they have created conciliation centers within every district before the SDM office. So they do the conciliation part very fast these days. Within 3 months, they would decide and then they will send the matter. In Delhi, they send it to the arbitration center. So it varies from state to state. There are states which do the conciliation within 3 months. There are states where the arbitration is also concluded in 3 months, they do a weekly hearing. But under the Arbitration Act, the arbitration can go up to 1.5 years. So in a worst case scenario, it could be 1.5 years for arbitration. In a best case scenario, it could be 3 months also.
All right. Next is if whether each and every company is required to file Form MSME 1 each year,
Yes.
whether there is a default in payment or not.
No, they have to generally file it in case if there is a default. Otherwise, it's a Form 1, I think requirement is there. They have to file. If not applicable, then you can put not applicable.
I think that is mandatory to file every year, no?
I said I mentioned that in the presentation. Uh, there is a statute. You can check the specified companies order 2019.
Okay. I think that is mandatory because
Yes.
institute also received some mandate from the ministry that you ensure from the companies get this that whether they have filed this they are filing every year something like that. I think this is every.
Because you see now when the service industry is in the scope, then every entity will have some or the other service provider. As I said, if somebody is even servicing your air conditioners, somebody is doing AMC for your computers, somebody is doing facility management in a building there where your office or your shop is located, then they may file under MSME. Even a residential complex, even an apartment complex which is where there is a facility provider, they may be covered under MSME and they may start sending claims under filing claims under MSME, and they may claim a higher interest.
Okay, so next one is, do we need to surrender MSME certificate if we cross the given limit? I think we have to just update and then there is there any certificate which is received or the just the
Online,
number
no, there's an online certificate. It's called Udyam certificate.
that
Once
is
you
not
complete
required?
the certification process, the Udyam certificate will come on your email.
Okay, okay. And that is not required to be surrendered. We just need to update them that yes, we have crossed the limit. If the
The thing is,
MSME
if you go beyond medium, then there is no registration, na? There is a
yeah,
large industry also, na? So,
correct.
so tomorrow somebody may go beyond medium also.
All
In
right.
that case, the turnover limit will be, not only the turnover limit will be breached, but there is a plant and machinery investment limit. So based on the plant and machinery investment, that is the first requirement. If your plant and machinery investment limit is breached, then in that case you will, like, if your investment in plant and machinery is more than 50 crores, then irrespective of turnover, you will not be a medium.
Mhm.
So if there is a unit that is starting at 52 crores investment in plant and machinery, they will straight away be large. They will not require a registration under the law.
Next is if the MSME decides to forego interest, then the company need not pay interest. Is it correct?
As I said that
That is
they,
called, I think, mediation and conciliation if the
yes,
company
but then if it is done in a settlement form, it is better, because suppose you are a supplier, you are a buyer and the supplier says, okay, I am not going to, I'll accept the payment without interest. But if things go south, they may still file a claim.
Mhm.
So it is better that you try to get a settlement agreement signed for such cases where then in that case it will be a settlement to safeguard.
Correct. Next is any delayed payment which is not on the account of sale of supply or goods or services will attract the provision of MSME Act.
No, no. For that you will have to go, if there is an arbitration clause, then you will have to go to normal arbitration, or you will have to approach the Commercial Court Act. I'll give you an example. Suppose uh, you have to supply to somebody, they have issued you an advance. Say it's a machinery of 1 crore, they have issued you an advance of 10 lakhs. You have done the entire investment on that machinery, but they refuse to lift that machinery. and forfeiting that 10 lakh is not serving any purpose, because suppose it's a customized machinery and it is useless for somebody else, then what do? Then you will have to file a suit for damages before the commercial court, or if there was an arbitration clause, then you will invoke the arbitration clause and you will file a suit for damages. Or suppose if there is a project related work, you are a
Hmm.
turnkey project where the project is to be completed in phases and there is no actual delivery of goods or services, but there is a delay, like the site has not been handed over to you and you are facing damages because the site has not been given, your machinery, your manpower is there, but the work is not getting done. So what do? So in that case also you will file a claim for damages either before the arbitration or you will go for commercial court act. In that case MSME act will not come to your head.
Okay, sir. Next one is what if a buyer company deducted TDS and deposited, and supplier has also paid GST, but actual payment is not received?
MSME act, you can, in fact, the TDS and the GST will only establish the admission of liability.
Hmm. We have been dealing with PSU and there has been payment delays due to various reasons, such as end users has not cleared GRN not cleared, delay in process by intermediary department. What is the remedy?
MSME. If your goods and invoices have been submitted, then opposite party may raise any number of objections. That will be for the arbitrator to decide whether the issues were genuine or not.
Yeah. Opposite party can be anyone. It may be PSU or it may be anyone. The remedy is same for
Yes,
everyone.
same for everybody. But let me also warn you that sometimes opposite parties also file counterclaims. Like if you file a claim before an arbitrator, then the buyer can also file a counterclaim. They may also say that the goods were damaged or we suffered loss because the goods were not of quality or not supplied timely. The best case is that they should have given that objection within 15 days.
Mm-hmm.
If not given in 15 days, they may file, but they may or may that those defenses may or may not be entertained.
Correct. Next one is MSME suppliers do not file GSTR return, and due to this, purchaser has to forego GST credit. Can purchaser recover lost GST credit from MSME supplier by holding its further payment?
No, you can't hold payment on that account. You can't hold payment on that account. And again, MSME law is not for the benefit of buyer, it is only for supplier. For any other claim or damages, either you will go to commercial court act if it is more than 3 lakhs, or to normal civil court if it is less than 3 lakhs, or go to the arbitration if there is an arbitration clause.
Next one is if a public limited company get registered in MSME as a service provider, but mentioned in MOA to do other business like trading, consultancy, etc. In that case, can a company lodge any complaint for delayed payment on trading of any material?
No. See, ultimately करने को आप कुछ भी कर सकते हो, you may do
They are
anything you
doing
want to,
wrong.
but
Yeah,
but eventually if the other side is aware of the law they will use it against you.
correct, correct. Ideally, they should not do like this. MOA and the MSME registration should match. Whatever they are doing should be correctly reflected everywhere.
Or at least an impression of a value addition, converting it into a service industry should be there. Merely shipping of goods from one end to the other will not help you to qualify to become an MSME to avail the benefit. See, they may register as an MSME, but the benefit will not come. Normally, MSME registration, because uh, for the some of the banking subsidies and all, the government had allowed the traders also to register as MSME. But for the delayed payment benefits, the MSME Act, only traders would not be benefited.
Next one is which is the best mechanism to go for recovery of dues? IBC, court, or MSME?
If more than 1 crore, opposite party is a private limited or limited, and the opposite party has not raised any dispute, then IBC. Three important ingredients for IBC. One is the minimum, the default should be in the range of 1 crore. Second, the default should not be a disputed default. I mean, they have already not raised a dispute with respect to quality or anything, because IBC does not deal with disputed debts. And third, and I said three things. One is that it should be covered under companies law. The opposite party should be a private limited or limited. Because IBC does, the supplier may or may not be a company. The supplier could be proprietor also. But to invoke IBC, the other side must be a private limited or limited.
Okay. Next one is can a subsidiary company of a foreign entity register itself under the MSME Act?
Pardon me?
Can a subsidiary of a foreign company?
Yeah.
I think any entity, if it
Any
is.
entity, see, let us understand how the Udyam registration will happen. I told you, when you will be registering Udyam, then an individual who is the promoter of the company should be having the normal Aadhaar card.
Correct.
So an Aadhaar card will be with an Indian person only. So if an Aadhaar card is being used, and then the company is an entity, they will ask you whether it is a company under Companies Act, proprietor, or anything like that, or a PAN number. So when you go for those entities, then automatically it should not be a problem.
Okay.
As such, you can invoke MSME Act even against a foreign buyer. You can send them the notice, do arbitration here. Maybe they don't come, it could be an ex party award. But mm, uh, there is no restriction. But somebody who's invoking should be an entity in the should be having an Udyam registration.
All right. So foreigner buyer can also be made the opposite party.
Absolutely.
Next one is do we need to file any return with the MSME department? How do we intimate the department that our MSME status has changed from micro to small or vice versa?
You have to change your registration. You have to update your registration or re-register if the status changes. And automatically your old registration number or status will be taken, so they will link it to that.
Next is in case where supplier himself says that he is willing to forego interest. Acha, this I think we have taken. What if the MSME is mentioned in the contingent liability section?
Just a minute. I am just trying to. I'll just show you the screen. Let me. This is the portal of the MSME registration. If you see, and this is the MSME registration process for new entrepreneurs who are not registered yet as MSME or those with EM2. In the good old times, the SSI registration used to be done manually by the DIC, and they used to file an EM2, which used to be Entrepreneur Memorandum 2. And then those UAM was Udyog Aadhaar, the regime prior to July 2020. So you can migrate to Udyam, re-register for those already having registration. So then those will re-register. So this is all online.
So this number also reflects whether the entity is a small or micro.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
You can see any Udyam number and you would know by seeing any Udyam number that as to whether somebody is a micro, is a small, is what, you can immediately see the
And the
moment.
state as well, it reflects the state code also,
Yes, ma'am.
which it
Just,
is registered.
just let me see if I can catch hold of an Udyam number. Let me show you. So now you can see an Udyam number on the screen. This is the online certificate that somebody gets.
Okay, okay.
Now, Udyam HR 03, HR stands for the state of Haryana.
Correct.
Now, it says whether the major activity. Now, an entity may have both manufacturing and services. It shows what their primary activities, whether they are majorly a manufacturer or a
Service
service
provider.
provider. Then, type of enterprise, small, type of organization, then do you have GSTIN, email, then जिसने register किया, whether the person who filed this was male or female, the date of incorporation of the company, the date of commencement of business, their bank details, their bank account number, and likewise.
So I think partnership firm or an individual can also apply here.
Anybody
Individual
can
can
apply.
also.
Anybody can apply.
Mhm. So we'll take some more questions. Can a company refuse to pay on the ground that MSME supplier has not paid the applicable GST?
That will be a separate proceeding, not under MSME. For everything else, as I said, commercial code.
What will be the date for calculation of interest in case of continuous services being rendered? The company has an agreement of issuing bills on quarterly basis. So interest will be calculated from the date of service or date of invoice.
See, if it is a continuous service, you cannot establish the delivery. Then we will take the what I recommend to my clients is that from the date of invoice, you add 15 days so that it becomes deemed accepted, and then 45 days thereafter. Because if you have issued the invoice and you have not received an objection within 15 days, then 45 days thereafter. Because there you cannot establish the date of delivery.
Uh, Wise is that utilization of formal sources like banks significantly small compared with informal sources like personal and family wealth in MSMEs. Is it true? MSMEs take the use of personal and family wealth as a source and not the banks.
Because most of the schemes for collateral free loans remain on papers while the beneficiaries are not that high. So people do not have options also. And then even for bank repayment, you need to have a track record and you need to establish a strong business model with respect to the repayment also. And ultimately, any business loan you may take, whether the collateral is not there, then also the guarantor and the guarantor's assets is also seen. So sometimes it's a challenge there.
What measures can be taken during the functioning and operational stage of an MSME to strengthen its governance framework and to avoid the last moment measures for rectification or restructuring or recovery?
Documenting everything is, I think, first and foremost. You have to document everything, have to have a system in place. uh, these days I have seen cases where the people have not issued a purchase order. There is no purchase order, there is no Sometimes the invoice is just blank. There are no payment terms mentioned on invoices, no limitation, no jurisdiction is mentioned. Then they have employees, but they don't have contract with any of the employees. They simply hire somebody, and when they face a labor issue, they realize, okay, we should have had a contract with the person also. So these are certain things that MSME sometimes, because of sheer lack of knowledge or absence of a proper administrative setup, they do not, they are more interested in just growing the business than completing the documentation part of it. And when things go wrong, they are harassed by the departments, or they are entered into never ending litigations. These are some of the measures that can be done.
They can take help of the professionals, company secretaries, maybe.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
mm,
Absolutely. I mean, you cannot have everything on your own. These days, there are so many shared platforms and cloud computing also, where you don't have to own a expensive software on an application. You get so many things. That is where you can do.
okay. How often do banking and financial institutions resort to rectification and restructuring before moving on to recovery?
See, normally a bank would not panic unless and until either you default on loan, or the collateral that you gave for loan, the valuation of the same has been changed. Because with the growing increase of NPAs and the pressure on the banks and the government, gone are the days when the bank manager could manage everything for you. Now, what will happen is, suppose you are going for a limit increase or you are going for a limit renewal, then at that time they would do the entire KYC or the assessment of the assets again. And if they feel that the asset is no longer, maybe initially when the first time you did, you went for an overvalued or a skewed valuation of the assets. So when the valuation change, they would either ask you to reduce the limit or furnish more collateral. And if you are not able to do that, that is when they start panicking. So normally a default or a change in valuation of your assets at the time of renewal or increase thereof is something which are the checkpoints.
Okay. Next question is, can we shift the case which is pending with Samadhan to judiciary?
You can, but I would advise that you do it at the conciliation stage rather than in the middle of an arbitration. Like suppose you filed an online claim, you are before the conciliation, but before the arbitration stage, you may say that you want to opt out of these proceedings. Because when you go to the arbitrator has, you have to submit amount before arbitrator. But if you did not go for arbitration, you may then go for it. But please declare that you had earlier filed under that act and you are no longer required to interested to pursue.
Everything should be stated.
But if their contract has an arbitration clause, then you cannot go to civil court. Then Section 8 of Arbitration Act will apply. Any contract, MSME or non-MSME, if the contract has an arbitration clause, then either it has to be arbitration or arbitration under MSME, but not the civil court.
So this arbitration clause restricts you to move to the judiciary. They you have
The
to go to
normal
the
courts, the normal
normal
courts.
courts,
Yeah.
normal courts. On what account set off will be considered valid against payment due to MSME?
What is reflected in all the documentations and paperwork. As I said, if you are doing a set off, then do the proper voucher entry. And since the bill, see, ultimately you will do a ledger entry in your ledger. If your ledger is still showing an amount due and payable, it is then an admitted liability. Your account internal accounting system should square off the entry when you are doing the set off. And not only in your ledger, if you are doing a debit note, then it should also reflect in the GST. It should not be that you have taken an input of 2 lakhs and you have set off the amounts and then actually not paid the 2 lakh amount. In your ledger, it will reflect at 50,000 less. So whenever you raise a debit note, you should also reflect it under the GST regime. And that debit note will go on the purchase side of your supplier.
Right. Next question is it necessary that both the parties need to be registered under MSME before filing a case?
No, only the
Just
supplier.
only the supplier for getting the benefit of the MSME.
Buyer may not even be an MSME. Has to be MSME, and supplier could be anybody, an individual, a company, a proprietor, a partner, a limited, private limited. Likewise, the buyer could be anybody. It could be a government body, it could be large company, it could be a proprietor, partner, even MSME. So both the entities could be identical, but the law only benefits the supplier, and that to the micro and small.
Hmm.
Buyer will be entitled to raise a claim as a counterclaim if the supplier has filed a claim, not otherwise.
All right. Certain money is retained against the performance guarantee beyond 45 days. Does this retained amount liable for interest under MSME Act?
As such, it is contractual obligation and it will not become due and payable, because that performance will be linked to when it has to be done. That is the reason, and you have agreed upon that. But let me tell you, if there is a default and if the supplier wants to go to the court, they may still claim MSME interest on that, but from the date when it had become due and payable. See, we had discussed that in the act there is an appointed day, and as per appointed day, the acceptance of that particular good or services will accrue when that 5% will be entitled. Suppose it says that after 1 year from commissioning. So even if you have sent the invoice, your appointed day will start from the 1 year of commissioning.
What is the procedure after filing the case under MSME online? Do we need to submit the complaint physically as well?
Yes, it varies from state to state. Uh, each Samadhan, the MSME center, the facilitation council, like in Haryana, they asked to give 5 paper books with along with all the supporting documents. Same way, then the MSME council will come into picture where they'll ask you to submit the claim and come for consignation. And they also have a nominal fees. I think in Haryana it is 3,500. In some states it could be 1,000 rupees draft or 2,000 rupees draft. So they do some kind of a administrative cost also.
But online filing is mandatory.
Mandatory.
Online is mandatory and physical is optional depending on state to state.
Because the moment you file online, they and you provide the email of the supplier buyer also, the claim will be submitted online. It will be sent through the email to the buyer also, advising them to either settle the matter or pay within of days, otherwise it will move to the next stage. So your buyer will know, when the moment you file a case, the buyer would know that you have filed the case. They will get an email along with this claim copy.
All right. And for the buyer, it goes to the directors or
The email address you will provide.
okay.
So normally if we like, if what we do is, if it's a private limited or a limited company, we take the email which is mentioned in the ROC.
Okay. Whatever we will give, there it will go, the notice and all. Okay. Lots of questions now. 4, 5 are remaining. We have covered almost 50 questions.
I told you, ma'am, it is always better understood as questions. And
Yeah.
I told you before we start that it normally goes for an hour when I start. So that's why I
Correct.
keep my presentation low and the question answer longer so that every query is resolved.
Yeah, it clarifies a lot also.
Yes.
One-way communication is not very effective.
So you are free to ask the questions. We can ask the balance also.
Thank you. Only 3, 4, 5 questions are remaining. So next one is, can we register a company again through same PAN card if it is already registered with its trade name?
Trade name is not an entity. Ultimately, there has to be a legal entity. Can you receive payments in the trade name? No, you have to have a bank account. And when you have a bank account, how will you do the KYC unless and until you have all the things? So, I mean, if you have an entity, separate entity, in terms of the PAN card, in terms of the bank account, you may register it, because then you have to register it as an entity. You may have a proprietorship and you may have a private limited company also. So if law recognizes you as an entity, it can be registered.
All right. Is Udyam registration mandatory for claiming the benefit of initiating proceeding again beyond 45 days?
Yes,
Yes, that is mandatory. One has to be. What remedy is available to the department when MSME has had provided substandard products and using MSME Act to extract the money? Within 15 days, they can obviously give their.
otherwise, as I said, when MSME will file a claim, they can file a counter claim. No?
Right, they can.
Normally they do not, because again there is a lack of awareness on that. If MSME has filed a claim, then you should instantly file a counter claim. Suppose
They are also role of
and
company
you sub,
secretaries.
and you substantiate it. Suppose somebody gets supplied you inferior goods, and because of those inferior goods, you had to buy from a supplier, alternate supplier. Then those invoices would be there. So you should have that paper trail. You file a counterclaim कि this particular entity, the supply was 5 lakhs, but they did not supply good goods. So on an offhand basis, I had to purchase for 7 lakhs instead. So I had to suffer a loss also. So your counterclaim can be for entire 7 lakhs that you paid to an alternate supplier. But simply saying that it was inferior goods, it was delayed, I suffered loss, does not come to your rescue. You have to substantiate that either you suffered a financial loss, which is evident from the books or bank accounts or the ledgers thereof.
Okay. Next one is, in case the entity has come out of the status of MSME but have not updated its status and still taking the advantages of MSME, what will be the repercussions?
It's wrong. You can, if they are filing a claim, the opposite party can. You see, the beauty is that you can always check the Udyam number status from online portal. It's in public domain,
Yeah.
and
But
the
one
date
has not updated now.
not updated. So if you come to know, then
If other party comes to know, correct.
then they can file. Then you can file a suit for recovery also. Even if you have paid, you can file a suit for recovery or damages that they misled, and you can seek that amount, refund of that amount.
The
Even
questions are
even
coming to misuse of the things. Next one is, in case of check bounce, can a supplier initiate multiple proceedings under Negotiable Instrument Act as well as in the MSME both?
yes, civil and criminal proceedings can be done simultaneously. So if you can go for MSME Act for civil remedy and under Negotiable Act for 138. Because in 138 you may not be able to entitle to claim the MSME interest. So to claim the interest you can go there, and for 138, of course in 138 also financial penalty is also there, but 138 is more deterrent because the directors will be summoned personally to the court. So they
Yeah,
would like to settle it. So you could do both.
all
You
right.
should do both if the amount is substantial, but
Mhm.
not if the amount is small.
Is receipt of goods is deemed to be aware of supplier MSME status if MSME registration number has been mentioned on invoice?
It should be. That's why I said if you put your invoice number, then in a way you have declared you are an MSME, and the onus is on other person to raise objection within 15 days.
Yeah. Okay. So the queries are almost over. Any one tip you want to give to our professionals, how they can grow and how they can make use of this MSME Act and aspects?
Ma'am, not only the MSME Act. See, since 2014, the new government came. They have created new enactments and they have amended certain enactments under the ease of doing business regime. Like earlier, the companies used to be wound up under the Companies Act 1956. Then post 2016, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code came, where it operates before the NCLT. And the earlier SICA Act was also repealed, which used to take place before BIFER. Then similarly, the Company Law Board and everything is gone. The MRTP Act has gone. All these proceedings are now come up before NCLT. The MSME Act is, of course, gained some teeth now. Then Arbitration Act of 1996 has been amended substantially in 2015 and again in 2017 and thereof. So what Negotiable Instrument Act was also amended in thereafter. And then, as I said, Commercial Court Act 2015 came so that the civil courts act in a much faster manner. So the escape of law is very difficult. And if somebody knows the law and the other side does not know the law, then it is not only financial loss, but also it may attract prosecution or embarrassment at times. So what I expect from the professionals is to remain updated with the legal framework which is concerning the corporates, the companies and day-to-day commercial activity. The commercial laws should be updated as far as like payment recovery is something which is an integral part of every business. Every business, no business can survive which is not able to control its default. So this is something very much required. In the end, I can only say that in today's world, you have to run fast even to stay where you are. So even to secure your position as a chartered accountant or a company secretary, where you are there, and like we do as an advocate, you have to run fast. You have to update yourself fast. It may not help you grow, but it may help you retain where you are. I think on that note, I'll end my talk. Thank you so much for all the patience and giving me an opportunity to interact with you people, of course, in an anonymous mode where I cannot see most of them, but I hope I did some justice to the time they spent listening to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Formally, I thank you on behalf of ICSI for giving your time, valuable time, and lots of inputs and your tips and experiences. And the number of participants we have with us is 8,250 and lots of queries. And we hope that many of the queries and the participants are satisfied and they could get the lots of clarification on these aspects. This the topic which we had covered. So I thank Jitendra Gupta sir.
I have compiled these certain aspects in the form of an ebook also. It's a PDF. It's a document to read. I'll share it on your WhatsApp number. If you want to circulate it to all concerned, you can do so.
All right, all right. Thank you so much, sir. Many time participants ask for these PPTs and the queries, and so we used to do that. So we can help them with this ebook as well.
Thank you, ma'am.
So thank you, Jitendra Gupta sir. Thank you all the participants. Yeah, the participants who have also given their time and raised the queries. So we will definitely have lots of other webinars also in the MSME series, and then after this we will start the startup series. So give time to us also, and as sir has just now said that we need to get ourselves updated. This is the motto and this is the only way so that we can get ourselves to the maximum. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. With this, we are wrapping up the session. Thank you.